Start the recording. So please take it away.
Fantastic. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I am just popping in here, so I was not necessarily prepared to do introductions. So what I'm going to do is we're going to move around with our speakers, and I'm going to go in the order in which the presenters are listed on the slide and have everyone just give a little hello and tell us a little bit about their background. So Jeremy, is Jeremy on?
Yeah, I made a mistake and didn't promote him, but he is coming right now.
Okay, well, I will pass it
Ah,
along to, oh,
I'm here, I think.
there you go, Jeremy.
All
Well,
right.
my apologies because you just popped on and I'm putting you on the spot, but
All right.
would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Jeremy Anderson, Deputy Chief of Analytics and Technology Transformation at Baypath University in Longmeadow, Mass. I oversee, amongst other groups, instructional design, institutional research, online support, and some other stuff mixed in there.
This is always a fun thing too, hearing people's, what groups report up to them with what titles, such a diversity. Eddie?
Hi, good morning. Can everybody hear me? Excellent. This is Andreo. I'm the Associate Vice President for Distance Learning at Cowley College. So I manage all of everything that involves online, and now I've shouldered all of face-to-face and brought everybody on from on-ground to online. And I have an instructional designer and a LMS administrator that report to me.
Great. Since Lisa is not popped on yet with the audio, Patrick, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks. If you guys missed the keynote, you should check it out. It was amazing.
Oh, thank
just
you.
a little plug for you. Yeah, really insightful. Gold. There was gold every 2 minutes. So I'm Patrick, the Director of Digital Teaching and Learning at Loyola University in Maryland. And like Eddie was saying, you know, traditionally online, everything's fallen under our umbrella recently. So it's been an awesome revolt against what everyone thought was supposed to happen. They're forced to do it now.
Yes, yes. It's a very interesting time. Veena?
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Great. I'm Veena Radhakrishnan. I'm the Senior Director of Learning Innovation at the American Society of Addiction Medicine. We are a nonprofit medical association. I oversee all of our instructional design and curriculum design for our educational products, including online learning.
Fantastic. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sasha Thackaberry. I'm the Vice President for Online and Continuing Education at LSU, which is why I have a lot of purple in my wardrobe here. So unless I am otherwise being notified by QM, I'm just gonna keep on moving with the presentation here, and we can pop off. So panelists, so that's us. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership strategies as applied to a challenge or a project. And because there are so many different leadership strategies, we kind of created a little bit of a structure to help us talk about them. How do you make change? And oftentimes in challenging circumstances with colleagues who maybe don't understand our field, right? So then we actually have, a kind of worksheet for you all to kind of help address some of these things on your own. So we are hoping that you will check out the worksheet component of it, and that can be useful to you as we move along. And so the worksheet is really just very, very simple, broken into kind of this change concept. And then we'd like to hear from you. So we'd like you to share some of your ideas in the question and response, obviously. Very excited about that. So first of all, this is our sort of change model here, and it's not mine, obviously. It's Beckert and Harris, but by way of, I want to make sure I give a shout out to Beth Rubin and Kim Siegenthaler, who shared this at UPSIA 2019. Not the whole presentation, obviously, but this change model, which I really became attracted to. There's a lot of similarities between this and the Cotter change model, but really it's a formula. So there's obviously a lot of research that goes into the back end of this. There's a lot of reading you can do on it, but it's the idea that you're creating dissatisfaction with current state. Sometimes you walk into situations where there's already a lot of dissatisfaction with current state. Sometimes you're walking into a situation where folks are very okay with current state, and you have to make sure that people understand why they shouldn't be okay with current state. But then you need a vision. So you need something to galvanize people around. What does that look like? What does that feel like? How do you get people excited about it? And then you need to start. You need first steps. So one of my favorite things with my team is, we always say GSD, get stuff done. So if we were able to have different things on our business cards, I would say GSD underneath every single one of our titles, because at the end of the day, our job is to get stuff done. And then that is basically the change model. Those three things should allow you to overcome resistance and get started in changing something. So we have a lot of great examples here. I'm excited to hear more about them from my fellow panelists. And so I want to just jump right in and kind of hear about what other folks are doing and some examples from their world. So Jeremy, it's over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. So the project that I chose to talk about here in the lightning round was scaling up adaptive learning at the American Women's College at Baypath University. And this was under a First in the World grant from the U.S. Department of Ed that we received in 2014. There were a couple of different components to the grant, but one of them really was this idea that we were going to deliver more adaptive learning courses to then impact long-term student outcomes like persistence to graduation. So if you're not familiar with adaptive learning, I've kind of given a screenshot here. The concept is that you break down the learning in a module into very small chunks, about 20 minutes worth of learning. You put them then into a concept map where students have to master the earlier prerequisites to unlock the later post-requisites. Each one of those activities on the map will also have multiple representations. So alternative text, you might have video, audio, interactive elements, and each student potentially gets a different version of that. The idea being that if a student struggles, there's remediation on the fly, and the faculty members and the students have more insight into how mastery is being attained. So this is the concept. Now, if we proceed, the idea here is that every stakeholder virtually in the organization was going to be impacted by this. The academics, so program directors and subject matter experts and faculty members, needed to understand how this was going to change their courses, their teaching practices, learning practices fundamentally. Instructional designers needed to acquire a whole lot of new vocabulary, understandings of how the tool could be used in different ways in different programmatic contexts. And then our frontline support had to be at the ready to really walk students through a new paradigm, how to use a system like this, how to do self-remediation in a situation where you've been much more experienced with reading textbooks and a little bit more of passive learning. And then our enrollment folks obviously needed on the front end to be talking to prospective students about what the value was in this, because it is a very different way of learning with different expectations. So we had to bring all of these folks along. And then if we take a look now at how we did that, I think this is where the fun happened. And not to say that it wasn't challenging, because it absolutely was. It took us about a year and a half to get into a really good groove, but we used a lot of strategies. And if this was not a change model I was familiar with, but as soon as Sasha shared it with us, immediately I started to see how the things that we did fell into the model. So that dissatisfaction, when I first started with the organization, right around the time when the grant was awarded, there was a high level of dissatisfaction that I was able to tap into. That read, discuss monotony of traditional online education was something that faculty and program directors were talking a lot about. They were looking for something new to infuse in their curriculum. We did have proprietary textbooks that were costing upwards of $120 or $150 in some cases. And then you tack on homework systems, and that cost can go up to $150, almost $200. So there's dissatisfaction with that, the inability to customize texts. And then there was this pervading sense of an instructional black box where you have students in the online learning classroom and you don't know what's happening with them until they do an activity like a discussion. And we start on Sundays. Discussions aren't due until Thursday. So from Sunday to Thursday, if all they're doing is reading and engaging with content, faculty didn't know what was going on, frontline staff didn't know what was going on. So there was a lot of dissatisfaction in a variety of stakeholder groups that we were able to tap into and say, we can do this better. So that's where the vision came in, where we said, all right, adaptive learning, there's good research on this. Here's what the research says. Do some readings, let's come together for town halls, lunch and learns. And we really demonstrated to folks how, with adaptive learning, we were going to improve student engagement and academic performance. We also were able to save on average about $80 per course taker for textbook costs, because we went with OER in all of these adaptive courses. So again, connecting to that dissatisfaction with the cost of instruction, we were able to say with adaptive learning, we're going to increase access for our students. And then empowering faculty and students, again, with that learning map, you can see directly what's happening up to the minute with each student, with the whole class in aggregate. So a very stark contrast with that black box that we were worried about earlier. So we set up this vision, we talked about it in these kind of large terms, but then we had to take some first steps. One of the best things that we did early on was get stuff in front of folks to demo and play with, and that just dropped the threat of doing something new, because it was much more playful. People were able to click around, and we invited all feedback, good, bad, and different. We wanted everything to set up that sense that we're in this together and we're solving a problem. So that was another big piece. The way that looked, we had course feedback forms that faculty members could fill out. We had a customized student course evaluation that included items on the adaptive platform. We did those lunch and learns where staff members were able to provide feedback. So a lot of different avenues for feedback to just be coming in and then process and go back to the stakeholders, say what we were doing to improve. And then the last thing we did was contextualize learning for each of those stakeholder groups. The one that I'm going to just call out, and we did literally for each stakeholder group a different training, but faculty, this was my favorite one. We put in front of them some sample assignments with actual data. We sent some staff members through to do the learning, and we then asked the faculty members in their training to react to the data that they were seeing and to design an intervention. And we did this in a training cohort where faculty members were able to share and react to one another's interventions that they were planning. And that richness of creating a community of practice with our faculty around a new tool was transformative. And that just gave them a springboard into their first course teaching. So all of that together is what got us over the resistance. And we've sustained this practice at this point. And that's where I'll kind of close out, where we have 60 courses. We went from 3 in year 1. We're at 60 now after the last 3 years of development. And we've sent about 10,000 course takers through. So a lot of really good change following a model like this.
Thank you. So now we have Eddie jumping in with his example, a guide to communication and decision making.
So Jeremy, that was a hard act to follow, so I'll do my best to stir the crowd up a little bit. That was excellent. So I'm from Cowley College. I've been at Cowley for 12 years now, going on 13 years. I was promoted to the AVP position for distance learning about 5 years ago. And what I realized was shared governance is absolutely imperative to the success of an institution. So if you don't have any type of shared governance in place, I strongly encourage you to either try and establish one or begin talking about that. We created a shared governance strategic leadership team back in the spring of 2019, which came up with this guide to communication and the decision-making process. So we follow this pretty strategically, and it has helped our processes, but also keep in line with our accreditation. So I want to show you, we went through 4 major initiatives over the past 4 and 5 years. One of those was an LMS migration, which I'm sure if anyone that's been in distance ed for even a couple of years, you've been through that and you know the stressors there. And that was supported by Quality Matters through training all of our faculty before we made that major jump, which provided that foundation of consistency and quality. The next initiative was developing a course template as well as a syllabus template that provided this consistency again across all of the online courses. And by doing so, it met more than 20 of the specific standards from the Quality Matters rubric. Another one that we just managed back in May of last year was moving to a SaaS environment from managed hosted. That wasn't as much of a heavy lift, but the bigger lift, and the one I want to talk about most today, was developing and implementing a consistent SALSA syllabus, which is an accessible stylized syllabus. And just to tell you a little bit about that, we had started a strategic initiative for accessibility about 2.5, 3 years ago, utilizing some pretty specific tools like Ally. And we realized we had a lot of work to do, but one of the things that we tried to implement was a consistent and accessible syllabus template that we were using in Word documents, and then we were having our faculty convert that to a PDF. What we found was that each time a faculty member would convert or copy in any item to that Word document, it affected the accessibility, which also affected our accessibility score across all of our courses and across the campus. That was when I started doing some research, and I had been teaching with another institution on another LMS platform. They had been using SALSA. So if you want to go to the next slides, Sasha. So this is the template, the idea of building that accessible and consistent template. What was the dissatisfaction? Obviously, that was the copying and pasting into a Word document, and it altered the accessibility. So that affected our accessibility score. What was the vision? Providing that consistent and really easy to use accessible syllabus template. Because we want to make things easier, right? As instructional designers, we're in the market for providing a consistent design, but also something that's easy for not only students, but for faculty to be able to be the experts in their content while we are the experts in design. So the thing I just can't stress enough, your first steps, if you have any type of idea, you need to get a seat at the table. And the table means it can be an academic affairs council, what have you, but really getting to the appropriate table to have those conversations and start building those bridges. So once you have that idea, you can really hash it out by presenting it, and if you're able to move that idea forward, starting to build that committee. And that committee can consist of some pretty foundational people, not only from your instructional designers to your department chairs, but I really encourage you to start including your faculty representatives, your deans, full-time and part-time. And if you'll go to the next slide for me, Sasha, this kind of builds into that. Thinking about others that might need to come to the table, such as your student representatives, anybody from registrars, advisors, know who needs to be at the table first. I think that is probably key to your success. So if you want to go to the next slide for me, this is just what we've done. We've created this syllabus link. This is a syllabus template. It's called SALSA. And going through some of the strategies, if you'll go on to the next one too. Again, some of those outcomes, some of those benefits that came across from doing this. We've built consistency. It's fully accessible. All of our courses, this is another thing that we had a little bit of resistance in, and that we are using this across all courses, face-to-face, online, and hybrid. And guess what? Guess how imperative and how helpful that was during the past 6 weeks. It was tremendous. It has tons of reporting features that provides the accreditation office with information as well as the registrars. And that template was all decided upon by and through our shared governance committee. So there's really not been much pushback because everyone that was involved with it had a seat at the table. We were the first Blackboard institution to implement this, and it really reduces some of the other features. It reduces printing costs. We also have a PDF option, and we have that dedicated link in our course menu. And that's the wrap up. Sorry, 4 minutes. That's hard to keep in time.
It is, but we are over to Lisa for her example. I'm glad you're taking the time because otherwise I'd have to hear myself talk.
Thanks. And Eddie, actually, your presentation, I didn't realize it when we were organizing this, but it was kind of a good lead into mine because I kind of tackled a couple of different challenges as I applied this change model. I looked at it from the position first. So those of us that have been working in the online environment for a while, we know that there's all kinds of titles and levels of administration that provide oversight for online. And, you know, sometimes that depends on the type of institution and the size of institution, but it also has just been an evolution in terms of the roles for online oversight and as new positions have developed. So what I wanted to do is, you know, based on a lot of discussions I've had with other colleagues through conferences, through workshops, through even going and doing reviews at different places, is that there can be frustration in feeling as though they need to be involved in more of the institutional planning and more of the discussions. So looking at this kind of from an aspiring leader's position, I find that there's a lot of people out there that they may be perfectly fine with staying in their current position, but they would like to have more committee assignments, more meeting invitations, participate in more conversations because they feel like maybe the institution doesn't realize how their role with online intersects with some other things at the institution or should. And then in some cases, they're working to try to move into other positions and feel sort of like, how are they ever going to get out of being kind of pigeonholed into this that they know online, and that's what they're good at. So Sasha, if you can take it to the next slide for me. Thank you. This is how I applied the change model to this. So the dissatisfaction that I've observed and also felt over the years is, you know, feelings of exclusion or irrelevancy. So as if it is extremely super focused on something to do with online, then it's relevant, but not necessarily relevant to, again, the bigger, broader institutional strategic planning and big picture. So the vision would be to have these positions feel more valued and have them identified as being more essential to the institution. And first steps would be, and this is where it goes along with what Eddie was mentioning, is identifying institutional challenges that you can address. So that was one thing that I found worked for me, and in talking with other colleagues is working for them, is to start looking for ways that you could provide input to some of the challenges, and projects are often challenges at your institution, rather than having somebody or waiting for somebody to identify you as somebody who could help. And then determine the person or persons that you need to connect with in order to present a proposal. So I found myself providing a lot of proposals to people, even when they didn't ask for them. I would just send them along and hope eventually it would get some traction. Resistance comes in a couple of places and ways, because initially there's going to be some territorialism that takes place and some perceived intrusion, usually by the persons in the roles that maybe were used to having seats at the table or participate in those meetings and committees, and not used to having somebody else from another area part of that. Ultimately, if some of your changes you are recommending are accepted, then there's that whole resistance to change that is pretty typical, just a new way of doing things, right, as it gets implemented. And my last slide provides some examples of the ways that I approached this when I had a position that was initially specifically for the oversight of online learning. But once we started to implement some of these other things within a few years, in my case, it did lead to a promotion that put me in charge of broader areas of the institution. So that was one of my goals at that time. So for example, the LMS, I found myself in charge of the LMS at one point. I didn't necessarily ask for it. It just sort of came with the position that evolved, was a new position at the institution for oversight of online. So with the LMS, I learned that if I could start leveraging it in a way, whether it was the tools the LMS already had or integrating other tools into the LMS, and I could show benefits to faculty, department chairs, program directors, deans as a whole, then it made the LMS a little bit more relevant, which thereby made the department and the staff managing it more relevant, right? So something like plagiarism tools, integrating that. Plagiarism is obviously important to online or on-campus faculty as it is online. So giving them the ability to utilize a tool that had previously been just for online faculty was a benefit. Feedback, there's certainly feedback abilities in an LMS, all of, kind of a one-stop shop for commenting, integrating a rubric, video, audio feedback. So again, selling those features and making them available to on-campus faculty as well is relevant, adds relevancy. Consistency. I had a department chair for a program that was only on campus come and say, hey, my specialized accreditor really insists on consistency. It's something I really have to make sure that these students, because they have competencies and testing that they're going to have to do, I have to make sure these courses are being taught consistently. So therefore, she found a need for using the LMS in a way that she wasn't required to do. Assessment, big institutional need, right? So being able to offer the tools in the LMS, most faculty found actually it made it easier in chairs and program directors. So that ended up being a win. Proctoring technology, saving class time and space while still maintaining academic integrity by providing that to on-campus faculty. And then the last example would be QM professional development. So all of our online faculty already had to participate in this, but those of us that are familiar with the rubric, we know that many of the standards apply to all teaching modalities, right? So again, I had chairs and program directors, in some cases of programs that were only on campus, but their accreditors required professional development, not only in the discipline, but also evidence of it in the areas of teaching and learning. So we started offering the APP QMR to on-campus faculty, and they found that that was very relevant. And that wraps up my part. Patrick.
Okay, yeah, I took on the challenge of presenting on, and we did at our institution, of moving from a no ID model to a required ID model. And I think you can read everything on this slide clearly, but it ties back to what Sasha was presenting at changing culture, and culture is not part of the game, it is the whole game. And so in each of these, I'll just talk a little bit about really our job, our task, our responsibility, our privileges Sasha was talking about is really encouraging and driving each of these. So we are encouraging dissatisfaction. We're actually actively inspiring it in people. We are creating that vision and casting it. We are setting the plan for first steps, and we are tackling that resistance. So this is not a passive endeavor. This is all of us doing it actively and setting that culture. So, and for dissatisfaction, it's a lot about telling stories. It's a lot about showing evidence. It was a lot about, in our institution, sharing that your peer institution that you envy for everything is already doing this. And so it's not me saying it, it's them that's doing it. I think the big idea is just getting a critical mass, and a critical mass can be, as it says, a tiny minority. And we think of the example of an hourglass filled with sand, and each grain of sand at any point can topple that pile of sand. And it doesn't have to be the majority of sand that comes through that funnel. So we really need to inspire that. And again, it doesn't take a lot of dissatisfaction to inspire mass change. This just talks about the vision, and really one of the key points I think on this one, again, you can read it all, is really just stats and stories, is about always using hard data and then always sharing that qualitative element, that element from what a faculty is experiencing and what a student is experiencing, even how program directors are starting to see the benefit from a scalability perspective. For first steps, and again, this can kind of work for anything. We wanted to focus on strategy. So while we were trying to move from no IDs to faculty pairing, we had a lot of people that wanted to work with us, but we wanted to work with people that actually had 12 classes in a program, because that would create that critical mass. We would have a whole program of people. So whenever you're looking for that, look for an opportunity to have a strategy of people to coalesce around an idea. So focus on the strategy. You're always selling. I think one of our main tasks as leaders is marketing. And then create a model, show them the way. People can't see what we see because they're not in it. And that's often a lot of the resistance. And so in this resistance, I think this can be useful for a lot of situations. We have people who are cynical, and I say we just ignore those people. We don't need to worry about winning them over. There's people that are critical, and we want to investigate why they've had these experiences, what we can do to change their perspectives. There are people that are cautious, and I think they're interested, but we need to inspire them to take that next step. And then there's people that are curious, and we just want to initiate with them. We just want to get started. So I think those are sort of blanket strategies that we applied at Loyola for this specific thing, but you could sort of apply it at whatever institution and whatever challenge you have.
Veena, we are over to you.
All right, great. So we've been having a great discussion around change and change management. So I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. As I shared with you all before, I am with ASAM, the American Society of Addiction Medicine. So the project I chose to talk about is how we implemented a centralized faculty management system, and would like to share our approach and some lessons learned along the way. So ASAM offers hundreds of educational programs each year, and we have faculty all around the country. So because of this, we recognized the need to centralize all of our faculty recruitment, faculty onboarding, faculty management, and faculty professional development activities. So we can move on to the next slide. We recognized that the challenge was that our faculty management efforts were decentralized. So there was no consistency in processes, and a lot of it was manual and labor intensive. And we were also using different technologies for this process, which made it even more difficult to bring consistency. So there was a sense of dissatisfaction among staff and among leadership. So our vision, we wanted to centralize this process of recruiting and onboarding faculty, as well as how we provide them ongoing professional development activities. So we wanted to improve and in also some ways automate the whole process. So we began this initiative by conducting focus groups with various folks within the organization to get a better understanding of our existing processes, as well as where there is challenges, pain points, and areas for improving efficiency. Following the focus groups, we created a very detailed concept map that outlined, what is our existing process, where is overlap in processes, and where there's redundancy and inefficiency. So, and then we also clearly outlined what functionality we were looking for in this faculty management system. And based on our needs, our IT team did an in-depth research and identified 8 faculty management systems that exist in the industry that met our needs. And then by participating in demos and product showcases, we narrowed it down to one system that met our technical needs as well as fell within our budget. Throughout this process, we also established a timeline for implementing the faculty management system, getting staff trained and onboarded, which also involved working very closely with our IT team, because we wanted to make sure that this new system functioned within our existing IT infrastructure. We also ended up implementing a train the trainer model, where the vendor trained some key users within each department, and then they trained their teammates. So coming back to change and change management, leading this initiative, one of the challenges that I anticipated was resistance to implementing a new system. So to address this challenge, we used 3 key strategies. One was communication, the second was inclusion, and the third was engagement. Throughout the process, we kept key individuals within each department informed and involved. We provided opportunities for participation in decision-making, and staff who were involved were not just managers and directors, but also specialists and coordinators who are, doing the day-to-day faculty recruitment and faculty onboarding activities. We also established milestones throughout the process, and we're open to change. We embraced change, and we're open to taking a more agile approach to the whole project. For me, as a new leader at ASAM, working within an existing infrastructure, what was really important was understanding the nuances, the complexities, and the realities of the organization, as well as the clients that we serve. And it was a challenge that was worth undertaking. And in terms of, the big lessons learned, as I said before, the strategies that really helped us was, communication, inclusion, and engagement. That was crucial to ensuring that this project was implemented smoothly and successfully. My big takeaway was that, when you are going to implement a change, it's important to communicate that change's relevance to the people's roles. How is it going to impact their role? And also its connection to achieving the organization's vision. So with that, I'll pass it back to Sasha.
Fantastic, thank you. Excuse me. So, as I mentioned before, I'm at LSU, and for those of you who are familiar with Moodle, when I came there, we have a very interesting scenario with Moodle. They had a lot of custom code, and so a lot of that code had to be removed, and we are going to be doing a pretty significant version upgrade this coming summer. So on top of #pandemic, we have #major LMS upgrade. I would once again not recommend this if you can avoid it the next time there's a worldwide tragedy. So one of the things that I really wanted to see a change in is when I came there, just the visual of those courses, it looked the same as Moodle looked in 2001, right? So it's what's called the essential theme, but literally had not changed visually since version 1.9. We're on 3.1 now. So there were a lot of issues with accessibility. We had previously worked with an OPM who had provided a very interesting template that had some components of it were literally hyperlinked images. So like parts of images that were hyperlinked for navigation for the course. It was kind of an accessibility nightmare. It didn't have responsive design behind it, which if you know Moodle, it's like a toggle. It's not like that big of a deal to optimize it for mobile devices. And then just in general, as an institution, there wasn't, as a flagship, the type of institution it was, there was not a lot of engagement in online, even in online courses, right? So part of it too was making sure that folks saw what happened. So we have an OCR consent decree regarding accessibility. So there was also a year-long institutional process of putting together a plan to make all of our websites accessible, all of our courses accessible. So part of this initiative was really wrapped into that, because sometimes faculty, just by default, like rolling over courses one year to another, there are some PDFs in some of these courses that are from like a textbook from 1974 that they just render as an image. There's nothing you can do about it. You need to get a new copy of that. So we had a little bit of a window into making sure that, it wasn't us coming along saying you have to make your course accessible. It was the federal government, which I'm not sure, to be perfectly honest, when we started the conversation, I'm not sure that folks really knew that difference. It was just like someone was saying your course has to be accessible. And then the other component, which I think goes to what motivates people in terms of dissatisfaction, is that we were really behind as an institution. And when you're talking about, like, as an SEC school, we get strangely competitive with other SEC schools about like learning, which is so weird to me because it's like a sports, it's a group of sports colleges. And then we're considering these folks peers when it comes to things like instruction. It's very interesting, but we can use that. We can use that competition. So the vision, I have always found this helpful. Prototypes. It is all about prototypes. Showing people what it looks like. Because you can talk until you're blue in the face, but until someone can visualize it, they can experience it from a look and feel perspective, they are not going to get it, if they're not in the field, especially. And then one quick example of how this worked is we had built our proof of concept. I was meeting with faculty in one of our departments. They were not sort of convinced, their stuff was online already, but they weren't sort of convinced they could scale it. And I was showing them the new course template, which for a lot of folks like y'all created a course template like 10 years ago or something, right? So it's a good looking course template though. I'll show it to you in a minute. But the faculty member literally in that meeting said, how do I get that? I want my course to look like that, right? It's just the difference is so stark. And then the other thing we do, and I mentioned this in the other presentation, is infiltration through language. So as part of that vision, just reinforcing the same things. It's shorter than an elevator speech. So our mission is high quality learning experiences, world-class customer service, and a financially sustainable model. We say those three things over and over and over again. And it is not accidental that the first one of those is high quality learning experiences, because people do attach their professional pride to what students get at the end of the day. And then in terms of first steps, as many of us do, we have to go around campus and do the dog and pony show and speak at different colleges and with different departments. And we showed it. We showed those screenshots of the new user interface. We built the first courses, and then we provided support for the switch. So we have a one-to-one design model. So one faculty member to one learning experience designer, and our learning experience designers design and build. So in a 16-week process, they come up with that course. That course is locked and loaded at the end of it. So there is an extreme amount of support, because as you see here on the left is our fun pre-template, which if you've ever worked in Moodle, looks exactly the same as Moodle looked 20 years ago. I don't want to say it's a hot mess, because in 2000 it was like cutting edge. But on the right-hand side, as you can see, is what our new courses look like in a new interface, which is called Snap. So we have, it has the progress tracking. It has very clear things in the template. So we literally have module 1. And then when a faculty member sees it, you see where that image is? There, it says placeholder, 200 by 300 pixels. And then it has like 2 sentences about this module, learning objectives. And then if you were to scroll down, you'd see a to-do list. Under that, you'd see an intro video for every single module. And then either the faculty member has their own like textbook integrations or LTI that go for like sort of the information delivery part, or they use the book feature for paginated information delivery. Then we do what's called a lesson, which enables you to do just quick formative assessments. We have either alternating in our template, and again, we can't force faculty to use it. So it's, you know, and it's not maybe appropriate in every single course, but we have alternating discussion forums and journal reflections. So in one, it's engagement with students, and we work very hard on making the discussion forums meaningful, right? And then on the other, it's metacognition. What are you learning about your learning, how you're learning, how do you think you're doing? So really trying to focus on really good and effective learning strategies. But this really helped people see what online learning can be, right? And so interestingly, so step 1 was implementing it for our fully online students. Step 2 was convincing people that we should be able to put it in as an option in the LMS. Step 3 was making it the default option in the LMS. And step 4 will be when we do the upgrade, that other theme, Essential, is actually going away. It doesn't exist in 3.7. So everybody's going to be on the Snap theme. And it actually did, in this case, pandemic did help, because everybody went online and the default was Snap. So now 70% of our courses are in the new interface, and we have people that have never experienced the old interface. So it ended up being like a confluence of factors, but the show part and tell can be huge, and showing other people's stuff. So if you guys, if anyone out there wants to take these examples, take them back to their institution and say, I mean, I'll give you, on our website, there's like videos of our courses and how they look and everything. Use it. Use it to create your own dissatisfaction. Take it back to your institution and say, oh, hey, look what they're doing for professional development. Hey, look what they're doing for their course interface and their student support or whatever, because I think that can be very, very helpful. So if you want to, and jump in here, Lisa, anytime you want to take over. We do have an example of sort of this change model, just so you can fill it out for yourselves. If you go to tinyurl.com/QM change model. And actually, after I created that tiny URL, I really thought to myself, it's not the, I mean, it's for the QM presentation, but Quality Matters is probably not wanting to claim ownership of the change model. So just as you know, that was convenience based. It's not officially QM sanctioned, but tinyurl.com/QM change model, you will find this worksheet. And so it just has some guiding questions for each of those components. So how are you going to, like, what is your goal, first of all? What are you trying to accomplish? How do you increase the level of concern, deficiencies? What is your vision? How do you communicate that vision? What is your plan? So how do you establish progress and demonstrate progress right away? And then what is the resistance? So you can articulate all of those things and be really intentional about it. So I am going to toss it over to Lisa now for a little Q&A.
Yes, if anyone has any questions, we had originally hoped to give you time to think about the worksheet and maybe share some ideas. So with our last couple of minutes, and thank you, Eddie, I see he just put the link in the chat for you directly too. If you, in looking at those questions, want to share what has come to mind for you and how you might apply this, feel free to do that. And if you have questions for any of us, feel free to post those. And if anyone else in the panel has any last words to jump in, this can just kind of be a group ending.
I think one of the other things I would recommend considering is, if you don't already, develop your elevator speech for your change initiative. So create 3 sentences, and as academics, we like to put a lot of semicolons and commas and dependent clauses in. This is not the time for that. This is the marketing part, right? Like the internal marketing. So come up with those 2-3 sentences and say them over and over again. And you can even shorten them like we did. Like we have straight up phrases, but sometimes for a change initiative, that's actually not enough to explain it. But I also just wanted to mention what Patrick had said about storytelling and narratives. It is a very effective way to communicate that. If you consider what, you know, President Ronald Reagan did, you can bring the data, but people connect with what was Susie Q's story, or what was Andy's story, or what, you know, individual narratives about students.
I see there's one question, Stephen, in the Q&A, and you asked me what I think the role of adjunct faculty are in an online program and challenges. I think that what I found anyways from the administrative perspective, as well as from the adjunct faculty perspective, you know, being an adjunct faculty, is that oftentimes the adjunct faculty are very willing to go through all of the requirements that are in place for online faculty, whereas some of the traditional faculty who have evolved to online and maybe had been teaching online for a long time before we were considering some of the things that actually make it an effective teaching and learning environment, can sometimes be a little bit more resistant to some of those changes, right? When they learn that they have to take some professional development. So I think there's motivation for part-time faculty, especially if they aspire to be full-time, to want to do everything in order to possibly get one of those positions, in addition to perhaps seeing things at a larger scale. A lot of adjunct faculty teach multiple places, so they recognize this is happening in a lot of places, as opposed to just, maybe only having experience at one institution and feeling like it's a new mandate. Anyone else want to jump in and share thoughts on that? Feel free to.
You are always going to have to stop me, Lisa. I think one of the things that's interesting about adjunct faculty is setting the example of sharing, right? So sometimes we have faculty who are maybe a little bit reluctant to dive into Creative Commons licensing or the ability to share your materials. Sharing your stuff and sharing your courses and sharing the designs that you've created can help promote that culture for sure, of change, of low cost materials for students. A lot of times at institutions, there's the opportunity to teach like an orientation course or a student success course that can help get you involved with some other initiatives around student success, around how to ensure that students are engaged online, and bringing your experiences from other institutions, if indeed, because many adjuncts do teach at many institutions, bringing those experiences, oh, we're doing this over here, oh, we're doing this over here. When I was at Cuyahoga Community College, we did have adjuncts as part of some of our committees, for sure. There was, and there was like compensation associated with that. I think I do think the biggest thing is sharing your materials, because that demonstrates big time that you believe in the value of low cost materials or free materials for students, and also your professionalism, because we're not in a place where content has the same cost that it used to, right? So no one's brain power is worth so much in the marketplace that they can't share it freely.
Sasha, I would echo and even add to that, still being in the community college sector, that we value the adjuncts tremendously, in that when we are building master courses for certain programs, we will invite them to be a part of the building of those courses, because we find that they have a certain outsider's perspective that can be tremendously helpful to building quality in those master course shells.
And I know we're about out of time. There is another question that was posted for any of us. What tensions have you encountered between innovation and shared faculty governance, where innovative ideas often languish? Anyone want to tackle that one?
I'd say if you want to tackle it in like 2 or 3 minutes and then let people have their break, that would be awesome.
Patrick's like, I'm walking away from that. So I would say in some cases, you just have to be very upfront and change policy, and I'm one for dancing with the ugly, like bring people out of their camps, have coffee, have a discussion about things. Even if you don't agree with something or you have to say no to somebody, like practice how many times can you say yes in a conversation, but say no to the actual thing, and have that be clear. Because every time you say yes, there's a psychological signal, we're in this together, we're in this together, we're in this together, right? So in some cases, we had to change a prior learning assessment policy. We need to tackle reentry versus transfer. The prior learning assessment thing was huge for a flagship, because usually that's not systematized. But if you find an example of faculty who are doing this thing on the side, what you're doing is just adjusting the policy to support all faculty. And that's really what you're doing. It's just, you have to be very intentional about that kind of internal marketing and storytelling to make sure that folks don't think it's an either or. The last thing you want is someone on a camp over here, because people just dig in their heels. And confirmation bias is a very real thing. The smarter people are, the more they embrace confirmation bias. So if they didn't like the thing you were doing to begin with, they're just gonna not like it more and more. So find a way to bring them to the center with you.
and this may not work for everyone, but we were also in a position where we were able to let some faculty opt out who were full-time, who there were plenty of opportunities for them to teach on campus without having to teach online. So that worked very well for us actually with some of the tough things, because they felt like they had a choice then. They weren't being forced to keep teaching online and have to apply the new requirements. Well, thank you all for attending our session.
Yes, thank you. Thank you guys very much. Thank you, panelists. I will take over sharing the screen and let everyone know that we are on break now until 11 o'clock. And so I will see people back here or in any of the other rooms for the presentations that are happening there. So thank you very much.